Hello, and welcome to another episode of the A Wooden Nest podcast. My name is Lindsay, and this is episode number 21. So today is May 26th. Yep. So it has been a little over 2 months since I last recorded because we had a baby. And we've just been soaking it all in with her, cuddling and spending lots of time just enjoying her littleness. She's my second child, and I cannot believe how quickly this time is going, and I know it's just gonna fly by, and pretty soon she'll be one and toddling around. And so I've been really enjoying family time and my daughters. It's been really fun to see my oldest daughter with my littlest daughter. And I will probably go ahead and talk about more baby related stuff, but I'll save it for the end of the video. So if you want to hear about the birth story and all that stuff, then stick around and I will talk about that at the end. So I won't go into it now, but I did take about a month off of really doing much knitting or anything creative, just because I was in the process of recovering, and that early newborn stage is so intensive, and I was dealing with some postpartum anxiety, which I talked about on Instagram. Things are much better now because I've been sleeping, and the baby has been sleeping longer stretches, and my husband and I found a system that works for us and stuff. So I think it was around the 1st of May that I started feeling my creativity and my motivation for doing things kind of come back. I've been knitting a lot, and I've been doing a lot of natural dyeing, and I've been doing some fermenting in the kitchen with some of the vegetables that are coming out of the garden already. So yeah, things are really good. I feel that spring productivity, and even though I don't really have as much time or really brain space to do all the things I want to do, I still feel like I've been able to kind of feel the influence of the season, if you will. Yeah, yay, spring! I think I've gotten more done over the past month than I have over the past year, which is, just crazy to me. But I'm here, and I'm really excited to be recording again and to be making things again. So for today's episode, I'm going to talk about works in progress, finished objects, some crochet, the natural dye knit along, and then I'll talk about the baby a little bit. So my first finished object is a beanie. I'm wearing it right now. It's this cardigan, and it has a really beautiful split hem in the back, and it's very simple, sort of minimalist vibe, and it has this really beautiful lateral braid detail on the cuffs, the hem, the pockets. And one of my favorite things about this cardigan is how the neckline is constructed and the way it sits. I knit this using the organic Gotland DK from Lerca Fibertails. I ordered, I think it was 6 balls or skeins, and I still have almost 2 left. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do with these, but probably something for my daughters. This is a 2-ply, I believe, woolen spun yarn, and it has this really, really lovely halo to it. It's a very warm cardigan. I am currently wearing it against my skin, and I have a pretty high tolerance for itchiness, so it doesn't bother me at all, unless I get warm, and then wool will bother me a little bit if I'm already feeling warm. But right now I feel really comfortable. I'm just wearing a tank top under it. It's 75% organic Gotland and 25% Falkland Merino. So it creates this really lovely lightweight fabric, and it's it feels kind of airy, but also incredibly warm. And I'm not going to be able to wear this much longer because the sun is out now and the forecast says 75 degrees for the next like week. So I'm going to have to put it away. But I've been wearing it quite a bit since I knit it. And I just finally put buttons on. It just chose these really, really simple buttons that kind of are low profile, but I think they're beautiful. So the thing about this cardigan is that I started knitting it for my body as it was before I got pregnant and had the baby and all of that. And so, let's see, I got gauge with the recommended needle size and I knit up the large size, which I think that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 7 sizes. It goes from extra small to extra, extra large. And I knit the large size, and I am not currently at that size. And my current size is different than the size that I knit it for. So even though it fits because it's a knit fabric and knit stretches and it's very forgiving and you can wear cardigans open, it does not fit in its ideal way at the moment. It doesn't close all the way around my tummy yet, so I'm wearing it open right now, but I still really love it and it's definitely getting wear already. This is one of the things that's been really hard for me with regard to knitting garments. All I want to do is knit myself sweaters. That's all I want to make. But at this period of time in my life, I am going through a lot of fluctuations with my body, and I don't know where I'm going to land with that ultimately. So I know that it's going to continue to change because right now I am eating a low carb diet, which is what I have to do in order to regulate my hormones and help with anxiety. It's the way that I can eat that makes me feel the best. And as a result, things are changing again. And yeah, like I said, I don't know where I'm going to land with all of that. So it's one of my greatest frustrations because all I want to do is just make myself garments. But is it a waste of time if I don't know what size to knit and how it's all going to fit? I don't know. But I'm still doing it just because it makes me so happy. And that's what I'm feeling inspired to do. So I'm glad that I made this sweater the size that I went for because I know at some point I'm going to fit back into it. And then I'm hoping that if my body continues to change beyond that, that it will still fit. Yeah, we'll see. So yeah, I really, really love this cardigan. I love the yarn. I love the fabric that the Gotland made. It's just beautiful. It's one of my favorite finished objects to date. And I can't wait to wear it next fall and winter. So my next finished objects are socks. So the first pair is a giant pair of socks that I knit for my husband. They're his Christmas socks, but yeah, we all know how that goes, right? Anyway, these were knit using Knit Picks Stroll, and I think the Garnet Heather colorway. I could be wrong, but it's in my Ravelry notes. It's this really beautiful red, and it's got flecks of like yellows, golds. It's a really simple sock construction. I just did some 2x2 rib at the cuff and then some 3x1 rib for the body. He really wanted ribbed socks. He wanted them to be really tight. So the way that I ensured that he could get them over his foot was to make a really, really high instep. And they are very tight, but they do fit over his foot and he can wear them. But they just kind of look ridiculous because they're so long and skinny, and they're probably the biggest socks I've ever made. They took forever. But they're done, and I also kind of experimented with reinforcing the this part under the toe. I actually reinforced the underfoot from about here to the tip of the toe which kind of gives the tip of the foot like a more narrow, it's a little bit more narrow on the bottom especially. And I don't know if it's going to do anything, but that is one of the places where he gets holes in his socks. So I thought it was worth a try. And I also reinforced the heel with slip stitches as well. And yeah, I think he's only worn them once so far because I took them from him so I could share them. And now he can have them. So much for Christmas socks, right? And then the second pair of socks that I knit are a pair for me. And it's just another basic vanilla sock. I ordered, I think it was 5 balls of yarn, of this yarn, which is the Knit Picks Hawthorne tonal yarn. And it comes in these really beautiful sort of gray shades, and each of the colorways is named after a town in Oregon, which was one of the reasons why I had to buy the yarn, because I live in Oregon. And I think it's very apt for Oregon and our weather. The colorways are beautiful, in my opinion. I think that this was the Grants Pass colorway. And I just did 1x1 ribbing for the cuff. And I did a slip stitch heel. Just regular toady creases. Nothing fancy about this at all. It's just my kind of go-to vanilla sock pattern, cast on 64 stitches. I put notes up on Ravelry if any of you guys are interested. But yeah, I knew that during my postpartum time, I would want to knit on just really simple basic socks, something I didn't have to look at a pattern for, because otherwise I probably wouldn't do any knitting. And I find that if I knit something, even if it's really basic, it'll help me keep my knitting mojo going. So yeah, basic socks. So continuing on with the sock theme, I decided to finally try sport weight socks. And in order to achieve this, I paired 2 of the Hawthorne tonal colorways that I got from Knit Picks together. And these are, let's see, this is the Newport colorway, and this is the Rockaway colorway. And I have put them together, held 2 strands together to create this really subtle marl effect on the sock, which is really pretty, I think. And for some reason, I've never knit a sport weight sock before, but after knitting this one, I will definitely be knitting more sport weight socks, because I have a ton of sock yarn, some of it from natural dyeing and some of it from leftovers. This was a very quick knit. I was able to get this done in a day, and I just feel like it's a very functional, sort of utilitarian thing to knit, and I can see just making tons and tons and tons of sport weight basic socks in the future. And I don't know if anyone else does this, but whenever I finish one sock, I always put it on my foot while I'm knitting the other one. So one foot is warm and the other one is cold. And I find that helps motivate me to keep going so I don't get second sock syndrome. That's not why I do it. I like to try it on and make sure it fits all right and everything. And this is, again, another kind of vanilla, super basic sock recipe. The notes are again on Ravelry, and I'll link it below in the description. But I know that I cast it on 50 stitches. I did the 1x1 rib. I'm having trouble with autofocus right now for some reason. It's weird. I did 1x1 rib, and I did a garter heel this time, which I kind of liked. I like the way that looks. And then just your typical decreases I can't remember how many stitches I picked up. I think it was 15 on each side. The only thing that is driving me nuts is that I was really sloppy about my Kitchener stitch on the end here. And so it sticks out a little bit on one side. It's really loose. So I left the string because I'm going to go back and take it out and redo it. I tried to do the thing where you pull it through, but it just tightened on this side and this side remained loose. So it just made it worse. So I'm going to have to go back and change that because I don't want the tip of my toe in my sock to be weak. I don't want the fabric to be weak because I feel like then I'll just be asking for a hole in my sock. So if I'm going to do it, I might as well do it right. So definitely more sport weight socks in my future. This is awesome. And this is how far I am in the second sock. So the only thing I will say is that I'm using size US 2 or 2.75 millimeter needles for this. And it creates a really wonderfully dense fabric, but it's very hard on my hands. The needles are fighting with this gauge. I will probably go up a needle size the next time I knit a pair of sport weight, which is a bit of a shame because then it won't be as dense of a fabric, but I think it'll be fine. And then finally, one more pair of socks. You may remember a few episodes ago, I talked about how my daughter really wanted me to knit her a pair of socks and was asking. And I think that she has an affinity for this color, teal or turquoise. I'm calling these the chocolats socks on Ravelry because chocolats is how my daughter says the word turquoise.
Tell him the sock on this foot.
What color are your socks, Ella?
Turquoise. Can I knit for you?
Which is adorable. And yeah, I tried these on. They're kind of hard to get on, but once they're on, they fit really well. So I will probably need to cast on more stitches the next time I make her a pair of socks. I cast it on 48 stitches, and I'm using a size 0 needle, which is a 2 millimeter. And I did 2x2 rib for the cuff for about 20 rows, and then a garter heel for 13 ridges, picked up 14 stitches on each side for the instep, and now I'm just knitting until about an inch before her toe starts, and then I'll start the decreases and do Kitchener. So again, another vanilla plain Jane sock, but in miniature size for my daughter. The yarn I got from my sister-in-law several years ago for a birthday. I honestly can't remember how long ago that was, but the yarn is from Happy Feet. I don't think that she bought it from the store, which I know closed down. It was a yarn shop in Portland, but I think she got it from the Mill-In store. I think I remember her saying something about that. So I've had it in my stash for a long time. It's a nice durable yarn. I really don't know much about it because I don't even know if I kept the tag. But yeah, Happy Feet sock yarn. And it's so much quicker to knit a sock with fewer stitches. It's just, you can get this done in a day if you're a relatively average knitter in terms of speed. I'm not a fast knitter. I'm not super slow, but I would not call myself a fast knitter, especially because I knit English style primarily. So that is it for socks. I did sort of on a whim cast on for another sweater earlier this week. I had some bulky weight yarn in my stash. It's the Brooklyn Tweed Query yarn in the hematite color. It's this really beautiful, like dark red, black red with flecks of purple in it in some areas. I've been really drawn to this kind of dark red color. On this end of the spectrum to like raisiny. that's been my inspiration lately in terms of color, which I suppose is very fall inspired, but I wear fall colors throughout the year. So anyway, I had this yarn in my stash because I was going to knit the Riverbend cardigan. But when it came down to it, I just decided I didn't want to knit that, at least not right now. So I was looking for another pattern to cast on for that would be really quick, because I just kind of wanted some instant gratification. And I came across the Ursa sweater by Jacqueline Cieslak. This is her name right here. And it's just this really pretty crop sweater with this half brioche detail on the sides and the hem and along the edges of the sleeves. Here's the back of it too. It just looks really beautiful. So I have finished the body of the sweater, and I gave it a good soak and block because I wanted to see how everything was going to lay. And also there was a very, very big difference in my gauge from the top part, which you knit flat, to the part where you connect it all into the round. It was just really obvious, and it might still be kind of obvious. Yeah, the ridges there, they're actually showing better on camera than they do in real life, but the ridges along here are from where I was purling, because my purl gauge is so much looser than my knit gauge. And then as you go along, the fabric tightens up because I'm knitting in the round. So that's something to work on, especially because I feel like it's even more obvious in this bulky weight yarn. So I wanted to soak it and block it to see if it would even out a little bit. And I feel like it evened out enough that I'm not worried about it. And I am probably not going to bother, re-knitting it or anything. I think it's all right. However, I made a couple modifications to the pattern. It's a really great pattern because it has like instructions for bust darts, and it tells you like if you want to lengthen it, do it here. I decided I was going to add some length to the body, and I think it works all right, except that the bind off that I used is just a really simple bind off, and it's not stretchy enough. So in the back of the sweater, it creates this kind of balloon effect rather than sitting nicely against my back. So I may try to rip out the bind off and do something a little stretchier. And if that doesn't work, then I will rip back to where this triangle of half brioche stitches at the bottom began, and I will shorten the length because I added, I think, 4 extra rows of stockinette stitch before I started that triangle. And I think it could go up just a little bit, like just an inch or so. I actually really like the length that it is in the front, but the way I blocked it's a little bit longer in the back. So I have some things I'm gonna try, but I am excited to finish this piece. I think I am going to opt for maybe some 3/4 sleeves, because in the pattern she has full sleeves, and I think 3/4 would be nice. And then I can wear it over dresses, and it could be more of a transitional piece. And yeah, this has been a really quick knit. I think I was able to finish the body section on it in a day or 2. I've been quite addicted to getting projects done fast with thicker yarns lately. So now I'm going to talk about something a little bit different. So I've been wanting to do some crochet for a while. So I have this giant bag of scrap sock yarns that are either skeins of yarn that I dyed from natural dye or leftovers from previous sock projects or what have you. And I've been intending to kind of look through and pick out some colors to make a crocheted blanket, but I just wasn't inspired by the colors. But I've had crochet on the brain for a while. I've been wanting to get my hooks out again. It's been a really long time, and I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I actually was a crocheter before I was ever a knitter. I was looking through some of my naturally dyed yarn, trying to kind of figure out where I was with all of it before the baby came, and I had this basket of yarn. These are marigold dyed and modified with iron. These were dyed with avocado and madder exhaust, and then I have this one which was dyed with madder and walnut. And just seeing them all in the basket like this got me inspired to knit a blanket, or to crochet a blanket. So I caked up those 3 colors, and then I added a skein of the undyed in the same base, and I just kind of started swatching, trying to see where I wanted to take it. This was my first swatch. I don't know what this stitch is, but it's basically you alternate half double crochets with slip, not single crochets, slip stitches. It's kind of like a slip stitch. And I wasn't really that inspired by this swatch. So I was like, well, maybe I should just knit the blanket. So I went back to knitting, and I got the idea to add some mohair into the mix. So I had these naturally dyed colors of mohair in my stash. This one was dyed with red onion, and this one was dyed with birch bark. And I decided to pair this with the other colors and made a swatch with it. And in this swatch I started with garter stitch, which I like the way that looks, but it's a very condensed fabric and I just wanted something that would spread out more. And then I experimented with some moss stitch. It might look okay if that was all you saw on this swatch, but it's very muddled, and the fabric is actually quite, the fabric it makes is actually quite thin, and I really wanted to have a nice cozy blanket. So then I tried one more stitch, which is this top section here. It's like a rib, but then you alternate the knits and purls for 4 rows. You do it again for another 4 rows. And I really like that fabric, but when I thought about it, I was like, there's no way I am knitting a lap size blanket in 1x1 rib. There's just no way I'm doing that. I want it to be a very relaxing, kind of mindless, sort of easy project. And 1x1 rib is, while my hands actually flow with it really well, it's not going to grow fast enough. So I decided to go back to crochet, and I didn't even make a swatch. I just kind of went with it. Went for the old granny stripe, which I just casted on for a lap size blanket, which I think was like 132 stitches. And yeah, this is the width of basically a good lap width. So in addition to the 4 colors of yarn and the mohair, I decided to add this little cakelet from a pair of socks that I knit for a friend of mine earlier this year. And I figured I would just add this into the blanket and have it be like the odd row. This is the row with it. So work the other 4 colors with the mohair, and then every once in a while add one of these rows. And I really, really, really love how this blanket is turning out. I love the halo. It's so soft, so squishy. The colors are perfect for what I wanted. It's turning out really, really well. And I can't believe that I didn't think granny stripe when I first started this project, because it's exactly what I wanted. It's exactly the kind of thing I had in mind. Just those meditative stitches, the really easy, fast growing fabric, something that you can just have and throw on your bed or the back of the couch. Yeah, this is really, really fun so far. I am having an issue with ends. I forgot how to kind of handle the ends with crochet. I am gonna try to weave them in as I go from now on, and I'm hoping that it won't look too sloppy, because it's my intention to leave the sides along this way bare if I can, though I may end up having to do some kind of border. And then I'm probably going to do a short fringe at the bottom and the top of the blanket. So yeah, this is not the side that I want the fringe on. Unfortunately, that would be easy. So I am back in the groove with natural dye again. I have been just working away at it and having a lot of fun. Right now I wanted to share with you an experiment I did with more of my daughter's old onesies, my oldest daughter's old onesies. I have talked about this in a previous episode, but she had a huge pile of just white cotton onesies. And so I decided to experiment with mortarting with soy milk. And I dyed most of them solid colors using logwood, which turned brown, madder, avocado, some safflower, and I think they're really cute. I find dyeing on cellulose fiber much more difficult and less intuitive than dyeing on wool, so I struggle with getting an even coverage, but it doesn't bother me. I decided to play around with the remaining white onesies and see if I could do something with a low immersion dye bath. So I put just maybe like an inch or two of water, and then I spread the onesies out in the bottom of the pot, and then I put like an avocado stone here, sprinkled some madder. I had some flowers, the black-eyed Susans. I sprinkled them in there, and just some other dye materials, and I brought it up to a simmer, let it cook for a little while, rinsed them out, and then chucked them in the wash with a load of old towels. And the results are kind of cool, I think. They're really subtle, but I think that they look fairly intentional. It's not really capturing. So it just kind of has like a really subtle, blotchy kind of effect. But I think that they look really pretty. Here you can see like where the madder root was in direct contact with the fabric and created little dots. I don't know if it's kind of coming off on camera the way that it comes off in person. I feel like it looks a little bit more intentional in person than it does on the camera. But I just thought that that was kind of a fun experiment and worth showing in case any of you want to experiment with onesies or experiment with doing that on cellulose fiber. I also really wanted to bring up the natural dye knit along. My plan is to start another natural dye knit along on the first day of summer of this year, and for it to go a whole year and to end on the first day of summer next year in 2020. So I'm going to dust off my Ravelry login and go into the group and create a chatter thread and see what I've missed, because it's been a while since I've been on Ravelry in the group. I'm gonna start checking it regularly and kind of sharing some of my natural dye adventures in the thread if any of you guys would like to join me in doing another natural dye knit along. I will be discussing that in more detail in the next episode. We'll start on, I think it's June 21st is the first day of summer. As far as shop news, I am planning to have another shop update at the beginning of June sometime. I will talk about that in the next episode, and I will also be mailing anyone who is subscribed to my newsletter some more information about that as well. Okay, so baby talk. I'm not really sure how in-depth I want to get with this, but I think in the last episode I mentioned that we'd had a pretty rough birth with my first daughter, and that I was hoping to not repeat the whole scenario again, but that's pretty much exactly what happened. With my first daughter, I had a really great pregnancy. I didn't get tired. I mean, I was tired, but I wasn't just completely laid out like I was this time. I only got sick twice, and it passed in the second trimester, and I felt much better. So it was a huge shock to us when it was time to have the baby, and my water broke, but I didn't start contracting, and I had to be induced. And I did get to the point where I was fully effaced and dilated and started to push, but after the first push or two, the baby didn't progress at all. And it turns out she had the cord wrapped around her in such a way that she was never going to be able to come out through the birth canal. And not only that, but I developed an infection, and we were worried that it was going to spread to the baby, and also she was in distress. So I got a C-section, and on top of that, I have supply issues. And yes, I've tried all the things about that. I think sometimes when you tell people that you have supply issues, they don't believe that you've tried everything, but some of us have, and it wasn't the scenario that I was envisioning. That's not how I pictured having a baby. It's not how I pictured the postpartum period being. I expected to be able to nurse for a year or two, and I was prepared for all of that. Well, as prepared as you can be. And none of it came to us. Like, that was not our birth story, and that was not our postpartum story. And it was really, really hard. It was really hard. And it took a long time for me to reach a point of peace with it. I can say now that I'm grateful for that experience because I feel like it gives me so much more compassion for moms and motherhood and the choices that some of us have to make. Kind of keeps me from being judgmental, if that makes any sense, because you just never know. You never know what a person is going through and why they have to make the choices that they make. So obviously with baby number 2, I was really hoping for a VBAC because it seemed like if the issue was just a cord issue, like her umbilical cord was wrapped around her in such a way, it seemed like we should be able to give birth vaginally. Or I say we, but me. So that's what we planned for. And luckily for us, the hospital that we went with is, they have one of the highest VBAC rates and one of the lowest C-section rates of the country. We went in for our trial of labor. This was a week and a day after my due date, which was already a bad sign. It was a bad sign that I wasn't going into labor on my own. And I started to feel anxious about that. I started to kind of understand that we probably weren't going to have a VBAC at that point, though I thought maybe it was just me being pessimistic or something. And I knew that if I could have a vaginal birth, that everything would be much easier because the recovery period for my first daughter was pretty rough. Anyway, everything was going really well until they broke my water, and then for every contraction I was having, the baby was dipping a little bit too low, and at one point she dipped for an extended period of time, and I had like a bunch of people enter into our room at once, and it ended up being fine, but it was scary. It was a scary moment. So they kept taking me off of the Pitocin or slowing down the Pitocin and reintroducing, and we kept trying different things, and it was a very slow process for which I am very, very grateful, because if it hadn't been for how careful they were about the whole process, I probably would have had a uterine abruption. In fact, I most likely would have. So after we were there for 50 hours, I'm not sure how much of that I was in labor for, but it was a lot. Matt and I called it and said that we were ready for the C-section. They were willing to try a couple more things, but by that point, we just all kind of knew. And you could see kind of the relief on everybody's face when we made the call, because I think at that point, like, we had all sort of realized that it wasn't going to happen. It turns out that I have something very rare called a Bandel's ring that went around my uterus, which, as far as I can understand, it's like a ring that forms through labor that constricts the baby from being able to move. And the bottom half of the ring thins out quite a bit more than normal. And they also told me that the scar tissue between my bladder and my uterus was paper thin. So yeah, I was very much at risk for a uterine abruption if I'd continued to labor and tried to push. And I was pretty close to the point where I would have tried to push. I was almost at a 10 and fully effaced. So we got another C-section, and this one was more intensive. It took longer. They had to make a T incision to get the baby out, and so I am no longer a candidate for VBACs ever again. If I have another baby, it'll definitely be a C-section, which I was already thinking that that I'm never going to go through another trial of labor again, because it's a lot. It's very painful, it's intense, it's hard emotionally. So yeah, that's the birth story. And yes, it's a very, very similar story in terms of how long we were in labor and the fact that we had to get a C-section. I got an infection this time again, the long hospital stay. It was all kind of a repeat scenario, except this time around, I was more mentally prepared for it, and the staff at this hospital was so much more uplifting and empowering, and I felt so much better about this whole experience than I did my previous experience. And I also knew that the sooner I got up and moving, the sooner I would feel better. And so I was just kind of gung-ho about getting up and taking that first shower. And honestly, my recovery this time around was a lot quicker, a lot more tolerable, and I just was not nearly as overwhelmed this time as I was the first birth. And the baby is now 2 months old, and I just feel like the rhythm of our life is starting to form, and she's sleeping longer. It's just been a really enjoyable period of time. The baby, her name is Meredith. I call her Mary. She smiles a lot right now, and she kind of talks back. And she's very snuggly. And she's a quiet baby, very easy. So, yeah, that's the birth story and kind of what's been going on. It's kind of hard to talk about a birth story like this. The judgments that we have about motherhood and pregnancy and all of that. I feel like it's worth talking about a different kind of birth story like this, though, because this is also what birth looks like. This is also what motherhood looks like. It's just nice to know that you're not the only one that's dealing with this kind of stuff. So anyway, I could go on and on, but I think that I'm just going to end it here because I'm starting to get loopy and I need some coffee. So anyway, I'm hoping to be back with another episode really soon. Until then, thanks for watching.